Thomas Piketty, Triana posted this over at DU over the weekend, and I thought this was interesting. The data, this was presented at the American Economic Association conference last week, and Emmanuel Saez, Gabriel Zuckman, and Thomas Piketty published data about why is it that in the United States, the bottom 90% of Americans have basically seen no or very little increase in their individual income since Reagan. And here is the data reveal other disturbing trends as well. Until 1980, income for the bottom 90% grew at the same pace as the rest of the economy. But after that point, income slowed down while the economy kept growing. See, that's Reaganomics, Reaganism. Up until the late 1990s, most of the growth, part of what's happening is that the source of the top 1%'s income has changed. Now, again, this was the result of changes in compensation laws and tax law. It used to be you couldn't compensate an executive with stock. Now you can. This was a change that was made in the third or fourth year of the Reagan administration. And the whole idea was we want CEOs to start thinking like stockholders rather than thinking like CEOs. And which is what they're doing. They're squeezing their companies for stock value. So anyhow, they say part of what's happening is that the source of the top 1%'s income has changed. Up until the late 1990s, most of that growth was the growth in income of the top 1% was driven by the rich getting higher wages. But since then, it's been driven by capital income, money made from returns on investment. And that jibes with a past study that found that lower tax rates on capital gains income are by far the largest contributor to growing income inequality. So if you want to do away with income inequality, here's this question that we have never had a good debate on, and I think we need to. This, if there's any presidential debate moderators listening for both Republican and Democratic debates, this should be one of the top questions. And that is, why do we ask people who make their money with the power of their brain or their body, from janitors to rocket scientists, from brain surgeons to teachers, why do we ask those folks to pay up to almost 40% of their income taxes, of their income as tax? But the most that somebody who makes their living buying and selling equities, the most that we ask them to pay is 25%, the capitalist gains rate. So capitalists have a completely different tax rate than workers. Right? Capitalists are people who make their living by investing things. And if you're a capitalist, and there's not that many in the United States who actually are real capitalists. I mean, there are retired people living off investments, but that's really not capitalism. A capitalist is somebody who puts capital at risk and in exchange for that takes a profit and pays a lower income tax rate than you or me, than people who actually work for a living. Why? Now, when these capital gains rates were first set as lower than the ordinary income tax rates back in the 19-teens and 1920s, the ideology was, well, people who are putting capital at risk, they're the job creators. They're building the economy. Now, it was a really naive and simplistic understanding of economics, because we all know now that the real job creators are the people at the bottom economically spending their money. What creates jobs is what's called aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is a fancy economist phrase for wages, particularly low-income wages, because people who earn, at or below the poverty level, they spend 100% of what they earn, which means that they are the most efficient at creating jobs of all of us. And if you give them an extra couple bucks an hour, they are going to spend that too, and that's going to stimulate the economy. So, this is just very, very straightforward stuff. So why do we have a lower tax rate for capitalists than for workers? Shouldn't we be rewarding workers rather than capitalists? Why is it that you've got these guys on Wall Street, the Mitt Romneys of the world, who are making hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in many cases, and the top income tax rate that they're going to pay on that is 20 to 25%. And many of them pay less than that. The average income tax rate paid by the top 0.1% of 1% is 17%, which is about what a McDonald's manager might make. This is what the billionaires are paying. So why do we have a special income tax bracket just for capitalists? This makes no sense to me. And in fact, it made no sense to Ronald Reagan. Reagan famously asked a group of school children once, you've got the clip? Yeah, we don't have time to play it, but I'll play it when we come back in 5 minutes. Shano's got it. But, Reagan, famously asked these students, who should pay more in taxes, the millionaire or the bus driver? Is it fair that the millionaire pays less in taxes than the bus driver? And the kids said, no, it's not fair. We'll play that for you in 5 minutes. Stick around. And we're going to pick up your calls here. This is Ronald Reagan. And for 1 year, actually, during the Reagan administration, as a result of this, and I think this was probably when the Republicans realized that Ronnie was not completely there because he was not always echoing the Republican line. He was occasionally reverting back to his old progressive Democrat ways. But here's Ronald Reagan talking about the capitalist gains tax.
We're going to close the unproductive tax loopholes that have allowed some of the truly wealthy to avoid paying their fair share. In theory, some of those loopholes were understandable, but in practice, they sometimes made it possible for millionaires to pay nothing, while a bus driver was paying 10% of his salary, and that's crazy. Do you think the millionaire ought to pay more in taxes than the bus driver, or less?
More, say the kids. So anyhow, there's Ronald Reagan. Do you think the millionaire should pay more than taxes than the bus driver? Of course, that policy only lasted for 1 year. For 1 year, the ordinary income tax rate and the capital gains rate, and I think that year was 84 or 85, but for 1 year, they were identical at 28%. And then capital gains went back down again, and ordinary income tax went back up again, and bingo. Income inequality started to explode in the United States.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.